Stay more comfortable, more concealed, and in the stand longer with Osseo gear. Premium camouflage apparel created for bow hunters by bow hunters. Osseo's revolutionary patented camo patterns and innovative features are designed to keep whitetail bow hunters totally invisible and dead quiet. Elevate your game with Osseo. Visit asiogear.com and take 20% off your purchase with code TRUTH20. Mobile hunters, our buddies over at Tethered are always innovating to keep us more mobile and in the game when it counts. From the Tethered One Sticks, the Fast Pack, to the Ultra Lock saddle, Tethered is always designing to increase comfort and utility while reducing bulk, weight, and fiddle factor of mobile hunting gear. And now, they've outdone themselves yet again by creating the carbon fiber forged Predator CFX platform, the latest fully featured mobile saddle platform that raises the bar for what's possible in mobile hunting gear. Whether you're new to saddle hunting or an old tree climbing veteran, go to tetherednation.com for all your saddle hunting gear. All right, folks, welcome back to another episode of the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. And today I have a fella on who I got introduced to. I shouldn't say introduced because it wasn't really an introduction, but I learned of through our mutual friend, Mr. Jacob Sklenners. Jacob's getting a lot of runtime on the old podcast here the past couple of weeks, showing him a lot of love. But he turned me on to this fella that I have on the other side of the mic with me, Mr. Brian Rogers from Illinois. What's going on, man?
Hey, what's going on, Clint? Thanks for having me, buddy.
You bet, man. I appreciate you coming on, dude. Illinois. I said that correctly, right? Because I know there's people out there that say Illinois. I say Illinois. What is it from a person who's from the state? How do you say it?
So that's actually how I vet if I know somebody is from here or not, because everybody else calls it Illinois, and it's the S is silent. But I gave a good buddy of mine that was on your show not too long ago, Rendell. He said it Illinois, and I was giving him a hard time. So because like if you're not from here, it would make sense. Why would you have an S on the end if you don't say it?
Right. That's right, man. It's funny because a buddy of mine lives in Iowa, and there's certain people who are from Iowa. They're from a specific part of Iowa that whenever they say Des Moines, they call it Des Moines. And I just thought it was kind of funny. So anytime I go through Iowa, I refer to it as Des Moines.
Yeah, and sometimes I'll mispronounce it just to be funny. You know what I mean? Over in the Illinois, just when I'm talking to guys that I've corrected before or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. It's I'm a good so there's a recent. I know I'm going to get a bunch of not heat, but I'm going to get a bunch of people messaging me about the most recent upload I just did for the podcast, because it was with my buddy Greg Litzinger, and we were answering listener questions, and one of the questions someone asked us was, what's our biggest hunting regret, right? And we were kind of making the joke, regrets, right? Because there's a movie where a guy has a tattoo that says no regrets, and it's spelled wrong, like on his chest, right? And the guy's like, you don't have even one regret, like not one letter, and so I called the episode no regrets. And I know someone's going to message me and be like, hey, dude, you spelled regrets wrong. Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Exactly.
We are the Millers, yep.
So, cool. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, the Millers. That's right. No regrets, man. Well, cool, man. So before we jump into things, dude, we'll get into talking hunting and stuff like that. But I always kind of like to break things down and give people a little bit of, a sense of who you are and your background and stuff like that. So before we jump into kind of like the deep hunting talk, if you wouldn't mind, give people who are listening a little bit of background about yourself, where you're from, where you live, what you do for a living.
Sure. So born and raised right here in the heart of central Illinois, not Illinois. And I have been hunting since I was a kid, like probably before I can even remember, but around 5 or 6, started off rabbit dog, going squirrel hunting, all that stuff. And around, I don't know, probably 97 or 98, I started deer hunting and was just, tore up with it. Wasn't good at it. Didn't know what the hell we were doing, but was gung-ho as they get. And I have been hunting and bow hunting since I was early teens, and started off public land, back before it was cool. And I used to farm for a long time when I was younger, and then I switched over and got into sales. And for about the past 10 years, I've been doing automotive sales, and about the past 4 years of that, I've been doing the finance part of the automotive sales. So it really helps with the hunting, not destroying my body, and being in the elements where I can sit and map scout and be more fresh whenever I can go out. So it's worked out really well, and it's the only thing is that it can be kind of stressful because you don't ever know when you're going to get off and stuff like that. So when it comes time to actually get out into the woods, it's hard to schedule them unless I actually have my vacation time. So
Right. Right. Yeah. It's funny trying to find, I always tell kind of younger guys, if they ask me, what they should consider doing for a living or whatever, for hunt time or whatever. And I'm always kind of like, first, it's like, well, do whatever it is, if you can, something that you like, because then makes it a lot easier, a lot more enjoyable. But like, of all the people outside of kind of owning your own business, and even that's kind of a tricky situation, because I know plenty of buddies of mine who own their own businesses, and truth be told, I probably get more time off and hunt more than they do, most of the time. But I have two friends of mine who work as emergency room kind of nurses. And like that to me, I find to be almost like the perfect type of schedule, because they work shifts where it's, they'll work 3 days on and then there'll be 4 days off. And then they'll work maybe 4 days on and they'll have like 5 days off. And if it hits the right way, and they usually kind of plan it out to where like their dates that they work hit to where, middle of November hits and they're off for like between the time they have off for like just their basic schedule in their vacation time that they'll be off almost like a month, like right in the heart of like when you want to be off. And I'm always like, man, I was like, that's like almost like the ideal situation. Now I'm just not good with like medical stuff, like medicine, so it's like, it would not work for me. But if someone has like an aptitude for that, that's like, to me, it's almost like the perfect job to have, to get like plenty of hunt time and have a good career and things like that.
Firefighters are kind of along the same lines, because they're one on, 24 on. I can't remember, like 48 or 72 off, and then so when they take a week's worth of vacation days, then they get a month off. So yeah, I know a buddy that takes his 1 week and gets to hunt the whole month of November, which, yeah, I'm always like, damn, that sounds nice, man.
Yeah. Yeah. I would guess, like, I have a buddy who's a cop too. I think it's kind of the same way for him. It's like, it's that shift type work where it's like, he's going to be on for like 24 hours or whatever it is, or a 14-hour shift or 16-hour. And he might do like 3 of those in a row and then be off for like a week or whatever.
Yeah, that'd be nice. When I was farming, the reason I started farming was thinking, well, I like working outside. I like the outdoors. I thought, I'll get in good with a farmer, maybe find some hunting ground, something like that. But what I always found is every farm that I worked at, there was already somebody that had the rights to hunt it, or some cousin or brother or some old dude that always had the rights, and there's all these politics and stuff. So it was funny, because when I actually got into sales, like the first week there, I made more hunting connections with people that didn't hunt but had access to land and stuff like that than I ever did working on farms for like 6 or 7 years, killing myself. You know what I mean? So it's just funny how your perception of things change as you get older and as you go through them. So
yeah, for sure. My one buddy, he lives out in Idaho now. He had the best setup for finding hunting property and getting access. He was a youth pastor at a church. And his father-in-law was the pastor at the church. And so he knew like the congregation well, right? And it was just like, and it would be like, older people of the congregation who have, a back 40, or they got 20 acres here, but it's like the right 20 acres in like this spot that just never gets hunted. And it's thick and it's all the stuff we'd look for. Right. He had for like a suburb area and the area that I live, he was consistently killing really, really good deer. And like, and I'd be lying if I said I wasn't like a little bit jealous, because it was also like, it wasn't hard it wasn't hard access. It's like, it usually was an easy walk. Like he and I would usually hunt one of the properties together, like try to kill some does or whatever, like the late season or something like that, he would usually take me. We never killed anything together because it was more just he and I hanging out and shooting the breeze and stuff like that. And if we had a chance to kill a deer, we would, but it wasn't like we were hunting real hard. But I would get to see some of the pieces, or I would scout some of them with him and stuff like that. And I'd just be like, man, this is just like a gold mine. Like, it's like, there's tons of sign in here. It's easy to get to. Like, meanwhile, I'm out there schlepping it with my kayak and some water, like the worst of the worst.
It always seems like the guys that can get access to like anything they want. And, and then the guys who can't are like, man, I would just love to have one piece that guy has access to. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. That's 100% it, and he moved away and I've turkey hunted some of those spots like with him in the past. And and we've done some like, goose hunting and stuff like that in some of those places. And so when he moved away, like, he's like, hey, I'll make an introduction for you, and, so you can meet them, and they'll probably just give you the hunting rights, like, and let you hunt there, but I'm not like I'm not a real outgoing person. So it's hard for me to just be like, hey, I'm Clint, I'd love to hunt your property, so I just never followed up on any of it or whatever. Cause he sent me pins and he sent me like, phone numbers and stuff like that. And he's like, just call him, tell him who you are, tell him we're friends. He's like, he's like, I'm sure they'll let you hunt it. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know, man. So, here I am still like pounding away on the public pieces, when I probably could have an easy setup if I just had a little bit more personality, maybe.
It's funny because when I get people into my office, because after they sell the car, they come into me and I sign them up and do all the paperwork and stuff like that. And if I get somebody that's into hunting or is a farmer or something like that, I definitely sit there and, we'll try and talk to them and stuff. But it's always funny because I actually don't want access to their farms. So they're used to everybody trying to get on to hunt their farms. And I have at this point, I just don't even care. So I'll be like, no, I got public. I just wanted to hear about your farm. You know what I mean? Like, or, just talk deer hunting. But they always think that I have some angle where I'm trying to, get on there just because I'm talking to them about it. It's like, no, I'm done with the politics on private, man. I'd rather have some room to roam. And, I really enjoy the public land thing. And that's really foreign and hard for a lot of guys to even wrap their head around, that I would rather do that. And now we have this whole mobile hunting community. So a lot more people are understanding and hip to it, but the general hunting population, like, we're just a small subset. So when you run into most people that hunt, they can't wrap their head around why you wouldn't want to go on some really, really good whitetail land over just jumping onto some public. So. Yeah.
No, I got kind of the same. It was a little bit different for me. We had a family farm. It was a couple hours away. Because I kind of grew up with a back 40 my whole life, and I didn't really start bow hunting until later in life. And so I was hunting a family farm, like whenever I did start picking up a bow and bow hunting. And there was actually just a ton of pressure there because it was, some family members would hunt it, and then some like friends of the family would hunt it and stuff like that. And so it was actually probably more pressure than most of the public that was around. It was also a 3-hour drive. And there was a particular deer I was chasing, and I had an encounter with him, 2 different times, and just didn't work out. And I knew where he was bedded, and he was bedded on the neighbor, and I just couldn't, he was just giving me the slip because I just couldn't get close enough to him when I knew where he was at, and that was kind of what changed my mind, where I was like, you know what, I need to be able to what you said, which is I need the room to roam. Like if I know there's a deer somewhere, I don't want to be as confined by property lines, and be able to try to go get him. Now, if there's a deer bedded close to private or whatever, that's a different story. But just academically, I will have more space to move about and have more opportunities to try to find where that deer is at, or where there might be an opportunity to kind of, catch him, if you will. And that was really kind of the reason why I made the jump. But whenever I started like I was watching some of your videos and stuff like that. And I think the thing that I was kind of surprised by was, that when I think of Illinois, I don't think of like rich public land opportunities, right? And so is there a lot of public land in Illinois, or is it sparse? Is it like, what's the kind of the situation with that, in your state?
So there's a decent amount around me. So that's why like I have a lot of guys that I know that, travel out of state to lots of different states for destination hunts and different kinds of terrain. And I feel like here in Illinois, we have a little bit of everything. There's swamps, there's hill country, there's, lots of ag mixed into everything. And so I just always feel like I don't really have to travel out of state to get different kinds of hunts. You know what I mean? And I mean, I definitely prefer the hill country stuff. But recently I've decided I'm going to start branching out to some different types of terrains and just kind of, dabble in some different stuff because, you never want to get too comfortable in one thing. And after a while, you start having success in one thing and you just kind of want to, the natural progression of things is that you want to try your hand at other stuff. But it's interesting because we're an over the counter state and we don't like we're over the counter. They have like a cutoff for the tags, but I think it was probably 10 years ago or something like that, maybe more now. They lifted it so that the amount of people that were getting denied no longer got denied. So like they don't deny anybody in Illinois. So I mean, if you want to come here, you're going to get a tag. So what that translates to is pressure, obviously, right? And so when people ask me like, "Hey, where should I go?" This and that, it's not a cliche answer, but it sounds like it. And I'm like, well, everywhere has good bucks, but everywhere has a ton of pressure. So you just have to put a ton of work in, and you're going to find a 140-inch deer. Now, above that, you're going to have to put in a lot of work. You want to get into that 150, 160 range. They're not everywhere because, there is a lot of pressure, but they're there. And if you're willing to put in the work, you can find them.
What have you noticed anything like the pressure change like over the past like 5 years or so, or has it been pretty consistent in your area?
I'm sorry, you cut out there.
I said, the pressure. Have you noticed an increase in like the past 5 years or so, or has it been pretty consistent for you over time?
So I've always seen a lot of pressure where I hunt. Like I remember as a kid seeing, plates from like crazy places. I could be making this up, but I'm almost sure I've even seen like Alaskan plates, possibly. But like just I always remember seeing just like plates from Florida, plates from Maine and stuff like that, and just lots of them. So to me, I always felt like there was just a lot of pressure on it. But I will say that last year the overlooked spots where I normally wouldn't get people, especially stuff by the road, because of podcasts and stuff like that, that people are getting more information. I was picking up a lot more people in the overlooked spots. So I don't know if there's more pressure, but I think there's more hunters that are better informed on where to look for deer and how to hunt bucks.
Yeah, that's pretty consistent with what I've seen, even just in PA. Now, it's not a destination state like Illinois is, right? But even a lot of areas that I've had for the past several years, let's just say to myself, right, to a degree, because they were overlooked spots, they were hard to get to, they had hard access, or they were just kind of like a little hidey hole that, was going to be really, really hard to find just through e-scouting. You're going to have to put a lot of boots on the ground to find it and stuff like that. And I've had, more encounters with people in and around those areas last year than I probably had the 3 previous years combined, I would say. And it sounds like that's kind of like what you're experiencing too.
Yeah, I was actually one spot in particular. If you watched, there was a spot where I killed my early season buck October 4th on one of my videos, and it was out of a bottom, and I killed him a couple hundred yards from the parking lot. And it's just a little buck bedding area that's away, the other way from where everybody goes usually, and it's surrounded by tree stands, but nobody goes down into the heart of it, so they feel pretty comfortable moving around in there during daylight, and then they make their way out to the crop fields at night. And I had ran cameras in there past few years, killed in there, and was, and had bucks that I was watching consistently year after year, the same bucks. And then this year, I had 2 or 3 different sets of guys in there hunting the crap out of it. The buck movement went almost to nothing after they started going in there, which is cool and good for them. I'm not like I'm I always support people getting out there, figuring it out, hunting hard, all that stuff. But I just saw more of that this year than what I had in previous years. In spots like that, I should say.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. So, 100%. So you were saying earlier, I think that there's in Illinois that you can find, swamp, you can find hill country. Like it's pretty diverse. Like the area that you spend a fair amount of time in, just in general, like what is the predominant kind of terrain, or topography that you're hunting? Because I think in Illinois, I think it's pretty flat. Now I've driven through it. I've driven through it enough to know I've seen some places where you'll have some like nice deep draws and little like bluffy kind of hills and stuff like that. Like nothing too awful steep, but like some undulation of the topography. But it's I wouldn't get it confused with like Southern Ohio or West Virginia or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So it's funny because until I started kind of making friends, out of state friends and stuff like that, I was kind of always in my own little bubble. And so when I refer to hill country, I'm talking about like 400 to 750 foot elevation lines. And when I hear other guys talking about hill country, it's a couple thousand feet elevation lines, mountains and, above 1,000 foot. And so I always thought my hills were hardcore, but they're not really, in the grand scheme of things, they're not that big. So, but so generally I hunt a lot of, like I said, the hill country I'm talking about, 400 to 700 foot, 750 foot. Then you have CRP, and you have ag, high and low. You'll have CRP, high and low. And so hardwoods mixed all in there. So it's a really good mixture of everything. And that's where I feel really comfortable. Obviously, a lot of diversity is going to create a lot of places for those big bucks to hide. And anytime you have elevation, diversity, water, anything kind of barrier to entry to keep people out, you're going to have some bigger bucks. And so that's kind of what I focus on. And, through the years, I've just gotten really good at figuring out just, some things that help me get in there and get it done. But the one problem I found with hill country is when you're filming, a lot of times they just pop in on you. So that flat ground, oftentimes you'll be able to see that deer before it gets to you, so you can get your camera on. And I don't always have that, that ability to do that.
You're making me think of a deer that I had. This is a couple years ago now, and so my season here, I live in like a unit that's a special regs unit for PA. So my season actually comes in sometime between like the 15th and the 19th. Just depends of September. Just depends on how the dates fall. But it comes in 2 weeks prior to the statewide opener, essentially. And there was a big deer that I had found. There's not a lot of ag around me, but there was one particular spot that did have some beans that year, and I glassed it, and I saw, still to this day, the biggest deer locally that I'd ever seen. And I put him at probably like 160 inches roughly is like what my guess was when I saw him. And and he was on private, and the public was a little bit of ways away from him. But whenever I started looking at the map, I was like, man, his best bedding opportunity is not going to be close to that private, because the doe families are probably going to be bedding in all these little like fence rows and stuff like that around there, which would push him to the next best bedding opportunity, which would be like the public, right? And so I knew kind of what area he might be in, and I had a camera in there, and I never got him on camera, but I still didn't. It was one of those things like what we were talking about earlier, where there wasn't a bunch of sign in there. I just had a feeling that like if he were going to be here, this would be the spot, right? And so the opening day, and this is obviously like before the shift, right? And so my thinking often early season for me, because my early season is like mid-September, is like, if I have a good deer that I think I know where he's at, I can press the envelope as hard as I want, because he's probably going to transition anyway, and like in 2 weeks he's going to be gone minimum, right? So I might have like a week to hunt him, and then he's probably going to transition to wherever his fall range is, and it may or may not be on that piece of public. I don't know, and so I pressed in on him, and I got to like within 20 yards of his bed. I didn't realize where he was bedded. I just was trying to get to a certain kind of section of this public, and I walked in, I got within 20 yards, and he jumped up out of his bed and took off. And that was the only time I've ever seen him. And it was just one of those things where, like you're talking about, like if I would have laid back a little bit, probably would have been a different story. But I was like, I only got maybe a week to hunt him. I'm going for broke. And, of course I went broke on that one.
You jumped a deer early season, and that tends to be oftentimes the reason why early season is a lot harder, which we know is you got more foliage, you got more hiding spots for them, they got more food, and so everything is stacked in their favor, which is why it's harder, but it's a lot more rewarding when it works out. And so every year I get my butt kicked in October, like 99.9% of the time. But if I can get an early season kill, I feel like the deer god for the year. So
Yeah. I know that was where I was at last year in PA, man. I killed that deer on like October 16th, and I was stoked because it's one of those things like I love that time of year. It just doesn't love me back most of the time, you know?
which on the flip side of that, in the rut, the hard part is staying mentally in the game because it's such a mental grind over and over and over. And I also think that's kind of why early season is harder for me too, though. So I take a couple weeks off in the end of October and then the second week in November. And so when you start stacking day after day of doing anything, I mean, it doesn't matter what you're doing, eventually you start getting in a zone of doing it, and then it just becomes easier to you. Whereas early season, I'm not taking my vacation, so it's like hunt here, next day, hunt, maybe 3-4 days later, maybe a week later, and you also have a less chance of hitting the right weather too. So like when you have a week off, there's a good chance that 10-day forecast somewhere in there is going to flip in your favor. So I often wonder if I had more time in October to hit cold fronts and to get into a groove, if my success wouldn't go up, because I think that usually after I'm grinding it out day in, day out, all day sit, constantly hanging and hunting, I'm super in tune with my gear. I feel like I'm in a zone, and then I just connect. And what's crazy is usually after I kill, I end up killing like right away again. So I usually, like, in the past 5 years, I think all of my deer have been bam, bam after I've hunted for a long time and not been successful or whatnot. And that's just because of getting into a zone with, your gear and your instincts and all that stuff. I think really start to get into tune after you do it day in and day out.
No, I 100% agree with you. I think the hardest part for me in the October timeframe is what you said, which is, I might hunt 2 days and then I might not hunt for 4 or 5 days because I'm working or whatever the case is. And there's something to that being in a rhythm, right? But more so for me, I'm just not. October is one of those time frames where if you're a day behind, like you might as well not even show up, because like something changes in the deer woods where it's like all of a sudden the food source changes, right? And it's like, and now they've moved to a different area. It's like if you're where they were last week or where the food was last week that you found, like you're not in the game anymore. You know what I mean? And that for me is like the hardest part is like, I'm always having to try to predict like where the next thing is going to be, as opposed to like if you had the time in October where it's like you can actually go out and validate it and spend like a day validating or 2 days validating, and go like, okay, well, this is the food source they've changed to now. Or what I sometimes see, is all of a sudden like they'll be in one area and it won't be necessarily food dependent. Let's just say, some scrapes start opening up like mid-October or something like that, right? And then all of a sudden like those scrapes go dormant, but like when I do my scouting or whatever, it's like, okay, cool, 200 yards away, there's like all these scrapes are opening up. Well, what happened was that pressure just pushed all of those deer 200 yards further in, and now all of a sudden that's where the activity is at, right? And it's like, and unless you're there almost like every day, like most of the guys I know, like buddies of mine that are really, really good October hunters, like they are hunting October like they hunt, like folks hunt the rut, right? Where it's like every day and like they're changing as things are changing in the woods, like in real time with it, as opposed to sitting at home like me going, all right, I hunted last Tuesday and this acorn flat was awesome. And then, okay, I'm going to guess that it's not hot right now anymore. So where's a white oak that was close to that? That would be like the second option for them, and go hunt that. And if it's not, either they're not there because they just haven't made it there yet, or they're not there because they have already eaten all those acorns. Whatever the case is, it's like I'm completely out of the game. So it's almost like, I feel like it's almost part luck as well that time of year. If you're not in the woods often, it's almost part luck.
Yeah, not only that, you have constant changing of crops around me. So, one day a standing cornfield could be holding deer, and the next day, it gets cut, and now everything changes. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I'm the same way. I get one day off in the weekend and one day off in the week. So I never get to hunt 2 days off in a row, unless I ask for, specifically ask for a day off. But usually I save those for the rut. So I often wonder in my head if am I a better rut hunter, or do I just have more time consecutively to hunt it, and to reach my goal. You know what I mean? Because repetition is always going to get you more
Yeah.
than skill. So if you can throw more hunts in a row at something, it's probably going to lead to more success. We always say,
I 100% agree.
In the sales world, like the car sales world, we always say the best time to sell a car is right after you sold a car. So it's kind of like when I kill a buck,
Right.
I'm coming off of a high of killing a buck, and I have more time to go out there, and then I go out and I slam another buck because I'm riding that high of positivity. Everything's working. I'm much more relaxed, and everything's flowing. So my hot tip for all the viewers is,
I'd like to
want to
say
kill
like
big bucks, kill a big buck.
Yeah, great. That's awesome. And I agree with you, man, because this year was one of those years. I had a killer year, and I killed that buck in PA, and then I headed out to Kansas, and that Kansas trip was just like I felt like I was just playing with house money, because I'd already filled a tag in PA, and it was just like riding high on that, super positive, and confident, and it was almost like one of those things where. I really wanted to fill that tag, but I was kind of like, I'm just going to go let it rip. Like if I fill a tag, great. If I don't, then, it is what it is. But I, filled one in PA, and I'm just going to go have fun. Like it almost felt like the pressure was off,
Yeah, and it's weird too, because usually after I kill my second buck, I'm in such a flow state that it's like I've been going so hard for so long that I've become like, every year you have to relearn things and get back into that killer mindset, and you finally reach that potential of what you can be, and you're just hammering it out, and then it has to come to a stop, and it's like you feel like you're wasting this ball of like energy that you've built up. I don't know how to explain it, but like now you have to sit on the sidelines,
Mm-hmm.
and you have reached like the peak, your final form, so to speak, being the efficient killer that you've been working up to be all season. At least that's how it feels for me. I'm like, I hate bucking out, because now I'm on the sidelines and I feel like I'm just ready to eat. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's I know what you're saying, because I had that feeling last year, and I had time left on my vacation, because that Kansas trip I killed on like the second day of the hunt, and I was scheduled to be there for 2 weeks. And so then I was like, man, I could slip back through Missouri and pick up a tag, 'cause I got a really good spot I like in Missouri that I'm actually going to go back to this year. And I called my wife, and she knew I killed the deer, and I sent her a picture and stuff like that. And she's like, congratulations. She's happy and stuff like that. And she's like, so what are you going to do? And I was like, I was thinking of slipping over to Missouri and hunting that spot that I hunted a couple years ago and see if I can't kill one there. And she's like, freezer's full, bud.
So
That pretty much ended that.
It's like that Facebook meme where it's like, oh, so you're tagged out, or you killed your deer, so you're done now, right? It's like, well, not exactly, honey.
Yeah. That is exactly it.
I always,
So
like,
she put. Go ahead.
No, I always end up going out and trying to like film for somebody, or take somebody like, hey man, I got this buck that's going to be, that's probably going to be here. Let's go out and try to get on him, and I'll just try and film you or something like that. So I'm always like still trying to hold on to it even afterwards. So.
Yeah, I did stay like I got him taken care of, and to the taxidermist and all that stuff. And then so I ended up going to a different area that I want to go back, and I want to hunt a different area just because I got some intel from actually the taxidermist. Like you want to find where the big bucks are, kill a buck in that state and take it to a local taxidermist and just spend like 2 hours there talking deer, and you'll figure out like where you should be looking next, And so that was what I did. He turned me onto a really great spot, and so it was about 2 hours away from me. So I got up early the next morning and drove and just spent like part of the day glassing, to try to see and just get familiar with the country. So I kind of knew what that lay of the land looked like, because it looked way different than the part of Kansas I was in. This area that he turned me on to looked way different. And so I went and spent, half a day just kind of glassing and driving around. And then the next day I got up and I was glassing and trying to help a buddy of mine that was in the same general area. I was glassing and trying to help locate deer, like for him, to try to go chase and stuff like that. Yeah, it dies hard, man. Cause like once you get done, you're like, dang it. Like I wish I was still out with a bow in my hand, but you gotta scratch the ditch another way.
Yeah. And, plus, usually I've used up like every bit of free time that I can with my wife and my job, and I want to see my kids and stuff like that. So like your regular life is like trying to draw you back in, and you have to come back down at some point, whether you want to or not. So, congrats on your buck.
That's
by the way.
a real thing. That's a real thing. Oh, thanks, man. I appreciate that. Yeah, he was a good deer. It was a fun hunt. Look forward to going back and trying to do it again. Not this year, but probably in 26 or 25 I'll go back, I think, is when I'm going to head back. Headed to somewhere new this year. Or not new, but back to Missouri this year. But yeah, we'll the regular life does tend to try to draw you back, and like me, just honestly, it's like I start to feel guilty like at a certain point in a trip, or a certain point in the season where it's like I've been gone, I've been selfish. Everyone's been cool with it, and I feel like I get to a certain point where I kind of start to feel like, oh man, I need to be at home. You know what I mean? Or I need to see my daughter and see my wife or whatever the case is. And then usually I come back and then I'm like, when do I get to leave again?
Well, yeah, that's like my eternal struggle is like, I always feel guilty when I'm in the woods. And then when I'm home, I'm always thinking about the woods. So it's like, there's no happy medium. You're either hunting and guilty, or at home and wishing, you're like dreaming about the woods.
Yeah, that's why I think that I'm ultimately a better out of state hunter than I am an in state hunter. Like, because when I'm home, I feel like I should be doing other stuff. Like on a Saturday, like say I get up and I go hunt all day Saturday. It's like the whole time I'm doing that, I'm kind of feeling like, I should be home doing X, Y, or Z or whatever. Or even some days it's like I'll get up and, plan to go hunt. And when I wake up, I'll just be like, oh man, there's like these 5 things I need to do. It's like, I should not go hunt today. And I won't go, But whenever I'm gone, wherever I'm at, whatever state I'm in, and it's like, that's all I'm doing. Cause I'm not going home until like the trip's either over or until I kill, and so it's like it allows me just to kind of be way more focused on what it is I'm trying to do.
Yeah, and I get that because I'm like that with turkey hunting, because a lot of the times I'll just call off a turkey hunt to hang out with my kids in the morning or something like that, because I only get, usually like Sunday is my family time. So if I'm going to go out on a Sunday, a lot of the times, or if I go out, I always feel bad because if I come back and I'm really tired and it's this beautiful spring day and the kids are playing and everything's perfect, but you're exhausted from turkey hunting, it almost feels like you wasted the day with your kids. So yeah, a lot of the times I'll just call off a Sunday turkey hunt and hang out with them. But I'm kind of the opposite though, in the sense of, because everybody tries to get me to go on out of state hunts with them, and I am just much more of a better hunter whenever I'm like able to come back to my own home base every night. So like I try to focus on places that are within a couple hours of home or less, and then that way it kind of relinquishes some guilt for me, because then I get to see my kids not just guilt, but like I want to see my kids. And so I get to come back no matter how tired I am, give them a hug, put them to bed, wake back up, do it all over again. But at least I got to kind of, still be part of their day-to-day, talk to them, stuff like that, fill them in on what's going on with my deer hunting, and then go back out. But also, like, I just like knowing that I'm going to have, my own bed, take a shower. I can get all my gear back inside and get everything put back together in the exact right way, get it put back out in the truck, get my coffee ready for the morning, get everything set up, get my protein shake going. Then all I got to do is wake up when the alarm hits, pull myself out of bed and then get back to it. So for me, I'm like way better on home. Like the idea of going far away from my comfort zone is something that like I think, at least in my head, because I haven't done it, would hurt me as a hunter. But I don't really know because I haven't done it.
Right. There's definitely something to say for having your creature comforts, and things like that for sure. The I think where it has helped me as a hunter more than anything was just, seeing diverse landscape and kind of getting to what you kind of said earlier, which is like realizing deer are deer no matter where you're at, and using the things that you're good at regardless of where you're at, but just figuring out how to slightly adapt them. Like that's ultimately made me a better hunter at home. Because I started building like analogs. Like I'd see something happen. It's just like anything else. Like you get time under pressure or time in the seat, like you just get better, like quicker, right? And that was the biggest thing for me was that, it was just like time behind the bow and time in different country, just gave me new perspectives and stuff like that, which has helped. But the creature comforts is definitely a thing, because I'll tell you what, when I'm on the road, man, my gear is a disaster. Like everything's just thrown in the cab, in the back of the cab of my truck. It's just like, and I'm digging through to try to find stuff, like, and then I'll have things that I plan to use, but I don't even use them because I'm like, I'll just make sure like the camo I want to wear, like the gear I want to wear, it's like, it's readily accessible. My bow is readily accessible. And if I'm in Kansas, like my decoy is readily accessible, and like I'll have some stuff in my pack, and then and that's it. Like it's like anything else that I brought with me, it's like it doesn't even get used. It just lays in the back of the truck, essentially.
Yeah, and like I'll like say I go out for an all-day sit and I get poured on, right? I'm soaking wet. And I've got self-filming gear, so I've got all these batteries and all these different things. And everything, I have to come down here, I have to take off all my clothes, hang them up, put a fan on everything, set my bow up, make sure and re-wax my string, take all my arrows out, make sure that everything's getting properly ventilated, throw all my batteries onto all the chargers, maybe dump some SD cards if I filled them up, and and then go back through my jumbled mess of gear. Usually I'll face mask and everything. I have a certain way I have to have it, so I have to go back through all my gear every single night and then organize everything and then throw it back into the truck for the next day's hunt. And I've always just thought like, man, I'd be out on the road and all my shit would just be this clustered mess, and I would just be cussing nonstop, like.
That's exactly it, dude. That's my world. That's where, like, because I start organized. I always start like with all my shit together. Like everything's got a place, and like and every year I'm always like, I'm gonna do better this year. Like I'm gonna keep everything organized when I get home and stuff like that. And it just never happens. Like it always just like, it's like within like a day, it's like a tornado went through my truck. Because like the one thing that I decide like that day that I need to find, it's like it's at the bottom of something, and so I just tear everything out to find the one thing, and then it just it just never goes back together. But I at least start out organized. My buddy Chad that I usually travel with to hunt, he's complete opposite. Like I have a rule that I don't allow him to have, like when we hunt together, because I have a little DIY camper trailer that I built out of a cargo trailer that we take that with us and we live in that. And I have a general standing rule that he's not allowed to hold the keys. Oh, yeah, cool. I have a standing rule that he's not allowed to hold any of the keys for anything that we're using while we're on the trip, because my guy will lose keys like it's his job. It's like he shows up to the hunt and it's like everything's in the bed of his truck and it's just like shit everywhere, and I'm just like, and that's just how he rolls.
That's hilarious. Just because he's always so technical and stuff on his interviews, you wouldn't think that. So,
yeah, no, he is. I mean, like his mind is very technical. You know what I mean? But like, but his mind is also like a spider web of like I don't know what. But when it comes out of his mouth, it's like it's very like on point and technical, right? But like the way that dude's brain works is just like I've got no clue. And I imagine his brain, like inside, if you could get in his head, looks like the back of his truck. That's what my guess is. Hope he listens to this so you can hear me talking shit on him. Nice.
Maybe
well, cool, man.
Me and him. Yep.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think I've watched something where he used to he used to ride bulls, and that was something me and him kind of have in common. I always thought was cool, and maybe he got his chickens scattered one too many times back when he was rodeoing, and maybe now that's why his brain thinks like that, you know.
Hey man, you might be onto something there, dude. I'm not for real. But dude, let's jump into some of your hunts, man, because I had a chance to get on. I had watched some of your videos after Jacob had turned me on to you, and like, dude, you're killing great bucks on public land, and the ones I ended up watching was like you killed a booner. Was that a year ago? Not last year, but the year prior, right?
Yeah, it was 22. Yep. So it was October
22.
30th, 2022.
Nice. So tell me about a little bit about that, man. So like, Illinois has good bucks. Like, a lot of people know that, but like what you were saying earlier, those good deer, if you want to find even in a good buck state, and I can attest to this, like whether it's from hunting Kansas or Iowa or whatever, yeah, you put in some work and you can find those 140 caliber deer, like they're there. But if you want to see like the big boys, like the reason why people go to Kansas or go to Iowa or go to Illinois, like they're just not around every tree. And that's like, there's extra effort and stuff that have to go into that. And so regardless of, what state you're in, like those are special animals regardless. And so I just want to hear a little bit about how you found that deer, how often were you hunting him? So just, I guess, start me from the beginning. Like, how did you learn of that deer, or did you know that deer was there?
So I had gotten a picture of the deer the year prior, on October 31st at 5:30, in the same exact spot that I ended up killing him. But that spot, I was really hunting. So to take it back, I mean, when I first came into this area, I was a kid going in there hunting squirrels with a bow. I can remember going into this area, but then I ended up like 2018-ish. I started actually going in there, back in there to bow hunt it for deer, because I had remembered going in there for squirrels, and I was like, you know what, this place, it sets up good. And back then I didn't really know what to look for fully, you know what I mean? And like the more my brain started thinking about it, I was like, man, that was a good little brushy ridge, and I did have some does pushing around in there back when I was younger. So anyway, I get back up in there, and that was where I did an observation sit up on the private line, not too far from where the deer actually ended up expiring. And so I get up on this private line where it's an elevated CRP field that butts up to some private, and then you have CRP down in the bottoms too, on both the public and the private. You've got some ag up top and down in the bottom, but there's points coming off of like the brushy or the CRP hillside. There's a bunch of points that jet off on both sides, and but there's one finger that attaches up there that runs along the fence line on the private. So I go up in the middle because I wanted to glass and look over onto the private and look out over onto this CRP and figure out how these deer are utilizing this at the time. I just wanted to get an idea of what was going on in the area before I just jumped into one of the points. And actually that first observation set, I saw what I believed to be a booner, or a really, really big deer, going out onto the private coming off of the public. And so I started hunting that side, had success, it's a long story getting to that, going through, like, I'm not going to go through each story and each hunt because it was a long series of events. But basically when I was up there though, I saw that booner, but also on this other point, I saw a couple of younger bucks, a 2-year-old and a 3-year-old, come out and hit this little scrape on this point, coming off of a bedding ridge. And so I'd always had that in my mind, and but I had hunted the middle of that CRP a few times and never really seen anything come off of that point again. Then I started running cameras in there, and I had ran cameras in there for like 3 or 4 years, and I really started to notice a pattern of that scrape right there lighting up towards the end of October, and especially like 29th, 30th, 31st. 30th, 31st, there were bucks moving in there all day long on my cameras. And through that time frame, I had started to pick up a couple of different deer that I was going after. One of them being this 10-pointer that wasn't very high scoring, but by the time I stopped finally getting pictures of him. I think he was 9 years old, because he was at least a 4-year-old when I first picked him up, and I had him for 4 or 5 years after that. And so I, I would hunt other places, but in the back of my mind, I was like, man, I need to get on this spot. But it's funny because every time I would hunt it, I would never see anything but dinks or does. And so my thought process was that because these bedding points are out there and I have to access through this long drainage, right? Where you have this open hub, goes to a tighter hub, and then this drainage goes up. My thought process was is that the deer were seeing me when I was entering it, that were bedding off of these points. Even if I didn't know it, that was just my feeling, is like can only be one reason why bucks are all over this thing and I'm not seeing them, right? And they have to be knowing that I'm coming in there. So my thought process was I'm going to wait for a weather system that produces a lot of rain and stuff like that, and a lot of noise, keeps my scent down, all that good stuff, so I can sneak up this drainage and then get up in there. And so that's what I did. I waited for a day where I knew it was going to be raining really hardcore. Even though when I was going up there, it wasn't raining as hard as I thought it was going to, but it was starting to pitter patter. And I get up in there, get set up. Again, it had some sign, but it wasn't like tore up with big sign. There was like a fresh rub and maybe like a little scrape opened up. But the main draw, or I shouldn't even say the draw, it's where two trails come together on the top of this ridge, where the two bedding points come together just outside the CRP, was that scrape that those deer had hit. But I've mentioned this on other podcasts too, is it wasn't like this big pawed up scrape. It was just like a big honeysuckle bush that had branches year after year that were hit. But oftentimes on my camera, the deer don't even hit it. They just walk past it. But like every deer in the woods walks past this thing. And so a lot of like deer would always just be coming in there on all different ways coming out. So anyway, there was like 2 or 3 different really big bucks that I was hoping to catch up with from historical data from the year before. And that the year before, he was a big mainframe 12 pointer, and he showed up, like I said, on October 31st at 5:30. But every year, and I mentioned this in the video, Halloween, every single year, there's always a big buck that daylights, multiple big bucks daylighting, and I'm out trick-or-treating. So my thought was I have to at least give this a try. I have the weather, and it's October 30th, but I'm going to go in there and I'm going to give it my all. So I was expecting the rain to go from about 1 to about 5 and then stop, and then I was hoping that something was going to come out and hit that scrape, whenever the rain stopped, and I was going to get a shot. But as luck would have it, I get up in there, and as it starts raining the hardest, like when the rain is just pouring down, the hardest that it could possibly pour, I look over, and in this other spot where I tended to hunt a lot more in there, this big buck is up and moving and coming by that scrape the other way. And I'm sitting there like contemplating, should I have been over there? Like, did I make the wrong move being up here? But the wind dictated that I needed to be up on top of this ridge the other way from the scrape, because the wind was blowing like this, the scrape was over behind me, and that deer was over here. So anyway, I'm sitting there, and I had that feeling. Sometimes you just get the spidey senses go off, and I just had this like extreme sense of like calm come over me. I'm sitting there getting poured on, just pelted. I just had this big buck come through. I had adrenaline, just like you have that adrenaline high, and you're just feeling alive, and you feel like you're in the game. And man, I don't know. I just had this weird like overwhelming sense of peace come over me, and I was just like, you know what? I'm in the game. I feel alive. This is it. This is what it's all about. You know what I mean? And sure enough, I look over my shoulder, and all of a sudden, in the same exact spot he was the year before, he's just standing there. I'm like, holy shit! Grab my bow, throw my GoPro on, because I didn't bring my main angle camera because it was going to be too wet, and I didn't want to risk it. So throw my GoPro on. And my adrenaline was so through the roof that I just drew the second I saw him. Like I turned around and just drew. And I'm watching him for like a minute. I think it was like 58 seconds. But finally, he steps into my opening, and I let her fly. So yeah, it was wild, man. I came unglued. I just couldn't believe that it had actually happened the way it was supposed to.
Right. Dude, that's awesome, man. And the video was awesome too. I just enjoyed kind of watching, and I like your videos because they're very authentic. Like there's no like fluff. It's the story. It's capturing the hunt. Is what I really like about it. Um, Man, when you said, this calm kind of came over you, it's so interesting that you say that, because I almost feel like when you know it's right. Like, both times this year that when I killed both those deer, it's like I had the same kind of feeling where it was just like everything. It's hard to explain, but you're almost like at peace, where it's like I could kill one or I could not, and I'm gonna leave content today. And it sounds weird to say that because you want to fill tags, right? But it's like, I don't know, I had the feeling like that where it was just like, just to be in the game, especially in Kansas, just to be in the game with a caliber of deer like that, to me almost you would think it makes it more anxiety filled, but for me, and it sounds like for you too, there was like a peacefulness to it, to where, man, I've almost kind of won already. Like I'm in the game with this caliber of deer, and anything on after this is just gravy, because like these are unicorns, man. Like even if you're in a great buck state, like these aren't deer that you see every day.
No, and I think people oftentimes think when they hear Illinois or Iowa, they think that we're just always on these giant bucks, and it takes a ridiculous amount of work to put yourself in a position where you're actually on one of these bucks. So, yeah, but it's funny you say that, because you're not the only person I've talked to that has experienced what I was talking about. Because exactly, it's almost like you said, like you won already. It's like I was at peace with winning or losing, because I felt like I had done everything that I could up until that point to put myself in the right spot.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. And then I always say this too, man. There's a part of this that's kind of up to the deer gods too. You know what I mean? Like, and that to me, I think was why I was like at peace. Cause I was like, one, I was grateful for the opportunity, where I was like, man, golly, like I don't get to hunt deer like this very often. Like most people don't, right? Like that's the majority of people. Like you don't come face to face with a Boone and Crockett deer all the time, and so that was kind of like, I think my peacefulness was just like,
story.
Go ahead.
Sorry. I think there's a lag, so I don't mean to keep cutting you off. But another part of that story is, so recently I just had a guy and his girlfriend come into my office, okay? And so after I killed that deer, you always think you're one of the only people that know, but I started getting pictures from the landowner, other guys that were hunting them. Like everybody, people were telling me they were from Louisiana and they had been hunting that deer and had shots at that deer. So like, your little world gets a lot bigger all of a sudden when you kill a big deer, because you find out that this deer, was in a lot of people's little world. So, so I had gotten all these pictures and this and that, and I had hypothesized where I thought that deer was coring at, as opposed, because I knew he only came in when the does were getting hot off those points. He didn't live in there, or I only had one picture of him, and it was on that October 31st time frame. So, but I had a guy and his girl come into my office. And come to find out, I'm sitting in there, and I come back in. And he goes, "Hey," he goes, he pulls up a trail cam picture, and he goes, "Is this that deer?" Because I have a framed picture of the deer when he was in velvet or whatever that another hunter had given me. And he goes, "Is this that deer?" And I go, "Yeah, that's him." And he goes, "So you're the one." He goes, "I was hunting that deer because the next morning it was pouring like a downpour, where like normally it would have took me like an hour to get to the taxidermist. It took me like 2 hours because it was pouring so hard. The dude was sitting like a mile away where the deer cored at, and he was sitting there through that downpour, and a buddy sent him a picture of me having killed the deer, and he threw his bow out of the tree." And we were laughing about it, like, that's it, but I just thought it was crazy, like how far of a reach sometimes a big buck can have. And so I was like, "You threw your bow, man?" I was like, I feel bad, because the same thing happened to me this year, where I was on a 170-inch deer, and then the last day of second shotgun season, I thought the deer had made it through, and I found out he had gotten killed by a guy on November 3rd. So I had actually been hunting him for a little bit, and he was a ghost. So it happens to everybody, but I just thought that was kind of cool how sometimes things like that come full circle. But
Yeah,
also, it
it's
solidified
funny
that
how
where I thought he was scoring at was true.
yeah, and that's a fur piece too, man. He was a mile away. You said.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, it's like those big deer, man. They always it doesn't surprise me anymore that how little we actually know about what they have going on. You know, because there was a deer. You know, I've mentioned this. I won't belabor the story, but there was a deer that I'd watched for a couple years. He was an older deer, same one I bumped out of that bed early season, not last season, but the season before. And I thought I had him like pegged, you know, because I had like multiple years of trail camera intel on him, you know, and I moved trail cameras around to try to find him, and like I'd re-find him. So I was catching him like in daylight now, so I kind of had a better idea. He got killed like 4.5 miles as the crow flies from where I thought he was living.
That's wild, man. But again, not too crazy to me, because so I had 2 deer this year in the summer that were running together. This big old 8-pointer, and then this like 4-year-old 10-pointer is what I think they were. And I picked them up in the middle of October, still running together, like 3.5 miles away at this totally other spot. So, like it always amazes me what some of these deer do, man.
Yeah, for sure. But the crazy thing is, man, so you kill that big deer, right? But but I think the thing that, you know, I appreciate the most about your approach to things is just your consistency, you know, because you killed, if I'm not mistaken, you killed 2 like really good deer last year too, this past season, right?
Yeah, it's funny because, you know, we talked about not having a 170 under every rock, tree, and leaf, and I was scouting this past season. It was like August 28th, and I come up this hill that was going up that had like a tree line, and it had some edge cover, and it was overlooking a standing bean field at the time. And I got up and I saw the first oak trees, and I saw they were dropping right into that transition line, and I said, there's going to be a bed right there. I didn't know there was going to be a deer in there, but I said, there's going to be a bed right there. No sooner had I said that, I look up, and at 10 yards away is a 170-plus inch deer hunkered down in the weeds staring at me. And it's crazy because the wind was blowing from me to him the whole time, so he had known I was there, and he was just waiting for me to go on by him. And when he realized that I brought the old cell phone, the S21, out to get a better look at him, he gets up and takes off. But again, he didn't make any noise. He didn't make a big deal out of it. He got out of there business as usual. And I said that deer was comfortable in here. He wanted to stay in here. So it's also funny too, because I had just talked about how I like to sparingly use mock scrapes on public because I don't want other people to see it and think it's a good spot. But I went just inside the woods about 80 yards and made a mock and threw it up, and I got him and this other big 10-pointer the next morning coming right back in there. So it was just kind of cool. But basically, he was my target for the year. And so, like, that was the one I said I found out got killed. But then I ultimately also ended up killing these couple 150-inch deer, which I was super happy with. But, you know, I had the chance 2 years in a row to go after that caliber of deer, which isn't super typical. So that was just cool to be in the game again on one.
Yeah, man, for sure. You know, that's wild, man, that you just how he just let you kind of walk up on him, man. And that just kind of goes back to prove the point that we were talking about at the beginning of the podcast, how stoic they are, man. And they don't make, like, how often, you know, we might walk in on one and bump him and never know that he was there, you know, and because he won't make a commotion about it.
Nope. And I think that's where most people think, you know, they go through there and they expect to see a deer get up, and it's not always the case, man. A lot of times, you know, you get that sense like you're being watched, because you are, you know. A lot of times they're letting you go right on by.
Yeah. Maybe the ticket is like, go to the spot that doesn't look like any deer live there, and that's the spot.
Honestly, you wouldn't be too far off in my experience, because if you find this, so I'll touch on another point too. Is a lot of guys are looking for that unpressured piece, and I actually would prefer a heavily pressured piece, only because it helps me figure out where to go a lot more. Like, big deer grow old in areas, you know, based off of figuring the people out. So all you do is go in and figure the people out, and now you take this big chunk and you narrow it down to this one little spot, and you know, it becomes a whole lot easier.
It's a great point, man, because finding humans is a lot easier than finding deer. Like people are going to tell you where they're at. They're going to leave the tree stands up. They're going to have flagging tape out. They're going to have bright eyes out, like whatever it is, right? And like I follow a lot of those same rules, man. There's one spot that I have that's a local spot that's pretty primo. And it's exactly that. Like I've kind of went through and saw like where all the markings were and where stands were and stuff like that. And I kind of went back and looked at my map and kind of just made a little bubble around it and was like, all right, well, here's all the human sign I found, right? Well, based on that, where would deer go? Like, where are the opportunities for them to hide, And then I just went and started checking those spots, and lo and behold, like, not all of them panned out, but one of them is a dynamite spot.
Yeah. So like, a lot of the times if I'll go into a new area, I'll pick a bunch of spots out on a map. I'll go in there and I'll throw a bunch of soaker cams in there, not even hunt it that year, and then come in the next year, or, come in, pick them up, and then just go over all the data. And usually it's always just like one spot out of all those spots, but it's that's the spot. You know what I mean? That's the money spot where you can go in there and capitalize.
Yeah, 100%, man. So how are you using, like when you use trail cameras, are you using them more like long-term data, or are you using like real-time, like in-season information? Like what's your approach to that?
Yeah, so most of what I'm doing is historical data. I hadn't started using cell cams until about 2 years ago, and until the very last deer that I killed this year, I had never killed a deer that I had on cell camera, and even the one I did kill on cell camera was 7 days later and 200 yards away from that cell camera. So I've never really killed a deer real time per se, based off of trail cams. I guess I take that back. There was a 3-year-old I killed on one of my videos from an SD cam over a scrape, and I went in there and checked it, and then went in there and hunted it. So I guess that one would classify. But for the most part, I'm using them to gather like years of intel on an area, or to rule an area out, or to centralize where I need to be sitting at. So a lot of what I'm using trail cams for is just to back up what I think I already know about the area, or to disprove what I think I know about the area. So I always say, like, we should never talk in absolutes. Like, there's no such thing as always or never in the whitetail woods, and I don't claim to know everything. So even if I think I know something, like think I have a spot figured out, to me, I'm just putting that trail camera in there to check myself. And then beyond that, if there are deer I want to shoot in there, I can kind of build a profile on that deer on when I think he's killable. And actually, I discussed this with Jake a little bit on the difference of our styles, where he will focus in on one deer and throw his whole season at that one deer, whereas I like to stack as many deer as I can throughout the season and throw a sit at the highest probability of when I think that deer is going to be in that spot. You know what I mean? So like to me, rarely will I chase one deer all season, as opposed to I will chase this big deer during this time frame, and vice versa.
Yeah, no, I'm a lot more similar to you, where I almost hunt spots as opposed to deer, where I'll know like a certain area turns on and there might be 2 or 3 good bucks in an area that I would be happy to shoot. And I'm like, cool. So, and I know that spot turns on, this week of October, right? So I'm going to be in there and hunting that spot during that time frame of October, right? And then I know there's a couple good deer over here I like that are spending time over in this general area, and so I'm going to hunt that whenever I know that spot gets right, and that's how I kind of plan my season. I just kind of rotate through those places. Now, every now and then I'll run into a deer where it's like, yeah, it's him or nothing, and it has to be a deer that's like a special deer type of thing, you know what I mean? But otherwise it's like, I always steal this from my buddy Josh Prophet. I always say, I'm like a coyote, man. I'm going to hunt for opportunity. And that's really kind of my approach.
Well, and that's what happened on that 10-pointer last year. Was I was actually in there on historical data from a big 11-pointer. And then plus I thought I was at the southern range of that 170. But then that 10-pointer I killed, I had him on a hub scrape north of there, not too far down in the bottom, just north of that elevated CRP. I had him on September 18th, And then he showed up a couple hundred yards to the south up by the road on a south of the doe bedding on a doe bedding scrape and crossing. It was nighttime and it was 7 days before, but I was actually kind of worried about running into him because I wanted to shoot the bigger caliber of deer, and he was a great deer. But I was like, man, I know I'm going to see that 10-pointer in there. I just have this feeling. And I didn't have enough time to judge what I saw. So when he come through that CRP, I was slap happy, as you saw in the video. I was sitting there, going crazy up there. Didn't have any food or water left, and it was like 10 hours. And so when I heard him grunt coming up this ridge in the CRP coming off the road, I almost thought my brain was playing tricks on me. So I just laid there in the saddle, just kind of like acting like I didn't even care, kind of like drooling on myself. And finally I decided, I was like, I better look over. And the deer was already like 35 yards and moving. I was like, oh shit. So I grabbed my bow, turned around, and by the time he stepped into the opening, I sent it sailing. And I knew he was a big buck, but I wasn't exactly 100% sure on how big. And you'll see that in the video. I was like, oh, I thought he was 190 and he's 150, which I'm still happy, but I wasn't sure exactly how big he was.
Nice. Yeah, man. It's I don't know how many times like you get into that lull where you just kind of start to space out and you're like, oh man, maybe I should look over there. Then all of a sudden, boom! Like that happened to me a couple years, 2 years ago. I was in a spot where it was like I was sitting there and like I don't know why I even looked, but I was like, oh man, I was like that kind of looks like an antler. Like I thought it was a shed laying on the ground in this area. It was like in some thick brush, and so I was like, I wasn't even really paying attention to it. I was like, whatever. And then like 2 minutes go by, and I'm like, I should throw my binos on that just to check. And it was like 40 yards away, and it was like in some brush. And I look, and I'm like, man, that branch really does look like an antler. I was like, that's pretty freaking like deceiving. I was like, that's a good one. Even with like the glass, I was like, it really looks like an antler. And then all of a sudden, like the head moved, and I was like, oh man, like a buck snuck in on me and bedded down like 40 yards. And I don't know how long he'd been laying there. I ended up watching him for like 2 hours and never got a shot at him. He just got up and walked away. But it was one of those things where it's like I wasn't, paying attention really, and thought I saw something, and it was like, nah, I didn't see that, and then I was like, well, maybe I should look, but
yeah, like the stick bucks, you think at the hue of first light and last light, and all of a sudden it gets daylight and you've been staring at a stick for a half an hour.
Yeah, man, I've almost killed a lot of stick bucks. For sure.
Yeah,
for sure.
Well, and the other thing too is you never want to get tied down to one spot just because your intel said it was good too. Again, things can change. It doesn't matter if it's been good 3 or 4 years. If you get pressure introduced or something changes around there, that can change a whole spot, which is why I'm constantly scouting for new spots, because I never want to anchor myself into that mentality of just because this is a good spot, it's going to be a good spot forever.
Yeah, that's so true. It's it's like, I mean, if you've been doing this any length of time, like you've had that happen to you, it's disappointing, especially when it's a really good spot. There was an area that I had that I thought was just like dynamite, and then what I found out was that spot was just so solely dependent on the white oaks in that particular area dropping. And when it's not a white oak year, or it's not a good acorn year, that spot's a ghost town. It's like, and I ran cameras in there, and I actually, and I hunted it once or twice, and it's just like nothing. And then I figured out the hard way why, and so to your point, it's like spots, not all spots are created equal, and not all spots last, is I guess a way to say it.
I've talked about this too before, but the one place that I will say can be very, very consistent is doe bedding at the end of October. And doe bedding period, but especially since does are a lot more consistent in their bedding year to year. That's why I think if you find certain locations for the rut, they're dynamite year after year, whereas early season, mid season, whatever locations can be super affected by the food. The crop rotation or the acorn crop or whatever. So like last year we had this crazy abundance of acorns, both red and white. Like they were just dropping everywhere. So it made it seemed like there was a lot less sign laid down early season, and it also made it seem like it was just a lot harder to figure them out. They weren't moving as far on my cameras or anything early season, so if you get a very heavy acorn year, it can make it a lot harder early season too.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's what a lot of my areas are focused on is usually, big primary scrapes around like adjacent to doe bedding. And then if I can get like a food source that's adjacent to that too, like either like really, really good browse or, acorns that are dropping that general area, that's usually like the cherry on top. But that's usually like my whole game, only because to your point, when we started talking about it at the beginning of the podcast, is just that time frame of October, not having, not taking a lot of days off, right? And like there might be a gap between when I can hunt. I just focus on those scrapes that get hit consistently, like that deer hit them all year round. And then that's usually always adjacent to doe bedding. And then the early part of the season, if I can find a food source that's like there as well, that becomes like my early season plan is like doe bedding, scrape, food source, boom. And then I know I just kind of rotate through, because what I've kind of started, and I'd be curious if you see this too, but what I usually start seeing is like around like the 13th, 14th, 15th, like big deer will start to make a mistake like for the first time of the year, like in that window. And I feel like they're really just kind of surveying like their route, if you will, in advance of like pre-rut kind of coming in, right? And I've seen that year over year, like always around that time frame, I'm getting like a big deer in the general area, wherever the camera happens to be, making their first daylight mistake like in that time frame. And so that's usually like whenever I spend a lot of time. I'll spend some earlier season hunts and stuff like that, but usually it's like that week of like the 15th through the 20th is like when I really want to be in the woods hunting for the most part in October.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's actually kind of weird you say that, because I've started to think of it almost like guys talk about the late summer kind of buck scouting trip where they go out and scout their areas where you'll see them, miles away from their core or whatever, because they're scouting like doe bedding, or they're scouting food sources for the rut and bedding for the rut and stuff like that. But I almost think it's kind of the same thing, where because I get deer on camera in that time frame that I might not even get in late October, but I get them coming through there on that route. So I just think that they kind of have like a late summer one, and then once they shift, they go out and they do it again. Is like my guess. I'm not 100% sure on what's causing it, but like, yeah, I get deer that I will see in that 15 through 20 time frame that I don't see in that last 5 days necessarily. Sometimes you will, but just random bucks coming through, almost like in the waning rut too, where you get that big buck randomly out cruising, long lining for the last does. It's almost like they have a pre too right there in that little time frame.
Yeah, it's like the more I talk to guys, the more it's like I'm finding people are seeing that consistently, and that's ultimately why it's become one of my favorite times to hunt, because I'm usually dealing with less pressure because less guys are in the woods that time of year, because everyone's like, oh, it's the lull. Everyone's waiting for that like 22nd, 23rd through the 31st, like type of time frame, right? Like, so everyone's going to take their vacation like around then and stuff. And like I'll usually go out and do I'll usually hunt. Well, I'll hunt all day, but I really like the mornings during that time period, because and I'll use the middle of the week too. Like I'll usually try to get out like on a Wednesday or a Thursday, because there's nobody out. The deer are being late. Like they're so used to getting pressured at that point, because they're a couple weeks into the season, that because there aren't people in the woods, like I feel like they start to get a little bit lazy in the morning on their way back, because they're like, oh, they're not thinking this, but in my mind, I'm like, if I were them, I'd be thinking, oh, there's nobody out bothering me. I can take my time getting back to my bed. I can browse a little bit longer on my way back. And that was exactly how I killed that deer this year. He was out browsing on his way back to bed, and then he hit a scrape that I was sitting near, and that's ultimately what got him killed.
If you can get a rainstorm the night before or during the night during one of those days, I always see like late morning big buck movement, like 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning, heading back to bed during that 15th to 20th. And so I always like, if you could get that next morning when it rained overnight and they're coming back to their bed a little bit later, I feel like it's like a perfect time to catch them while they're lazy and just totally off guard. Like you said, it's funny you said Wednesdays, because that's one of my days I get to hunt is Wednesdays and Sundays. So that's how my weeks broke up, is sometimes I get to hunt when it's not that pressured, and sometimes I get to hunt when it is pressured. But the funny thing is when I think back on a lot of my kills, a lot of them are on the weekend, and part of me has always wondered if that's because I hunt the places that based off of where the pressure isn't. So when the pressure is on, are they moving more into my area because of that? Is, kind of always been my question or hypothesis of it.
Right. Nice, man. Well, I've kept you here, man, coming up on just about an hour and 40 minutes, man. I want to be sensitive to your time, jumping on here to do this with me on a Sunday. I know this is your family day, but before I let you get out of here, I want you to let folks know where they can find out more about you, where they can find the videos, and then I know you also have a business that you have as well for trail camera adaptation to help kind of set them up, get the angle right and stuff like that, which I think is really cool because I'm still one of those dudes that's using the old school stick and the thing, so I probably need to get some of those. But let people know, where they can find out more and where they can get some of those.
Yeah, so GoodSitMobile is the YouTube, and it's also the website. I created a system for hanging trail cams high, and it was out of necessity because just like Clint, I used to use the stick system, and as my kids were requiring more of my time, I needed to come up with a way to make it more efficient because I was spending 7-8 hours out in the woods and only getting 3 or 4 cams hung. So I was trying to get 7, 8, sometimes 9 cams hung in an area, and I wasn't reaching what I knew I could. So I created the one and done elevated trail cam system, and if you want to go check it out, it's at www.goodsit.com.
Awesome, man. Well, I appreciate you coming on, brother, and I look forward to watching your success this year. And you got an open invite to come back and chop it up anytime you want, buddy.
Hey, man, I'm just super appreciative and humbled that you had asked me on, so I had a great time.
All right, folks, that is a wrap for today's show. I'd like to thank all of you for listening, and if you haven't yet, please head over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating, and be sure to subscribe to the podcast, and hell, while you're at it, head over to YouTube and give us a sub there too. And before I shut this thing down, we need to give a big shout out to our partners who continue to help us make this podcast possible. Osseo Gear, Tethered, Exodus Outdoor Gear, and Genesee Beer. And until next time, we'll see y'all.